she was, I think, understanding clearly what had happened. And I think she was starting to see that other people were responsible than who she previously had believed.
Diddy hated Pac. Facts. hated his guts. Hated him. Hated him.
The courtroom was so silent we could hear the ticking of the bailiff's watch, right before the man in the box leaned into the mic and dropped 5 words that shattered nearly 3 decades of silence. "I'm sorry, Biggie gasps. Camera snapped in a frenzy. A lawyer on the left fumbled her notes and sat back like she'd just taken a punch to the chest. This wasn't some low-tier confession. This was the alleged trigger man for one of hip-hop's most iconic tragedies, finally cracking under the pressure of time, guilt, or maybe something much darker.
The only man currently facing charges in the case, Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, claims that Sean Combs, also known as Diddy, paid for a hit on Tupac.
The man, whose name we're withholding for now, didn't just take the fall, he opened the floodgates. In sworn testimony, he claimed he didn't act alone, not even close. He said it was a paid hit, that word again, paid, and named connections tracing all the way back to Suge Knight's camp. According to his chilling confession, Biggie was collateral damage, nothing more than a pawn in a bigger game. One that wasn't just about music beef or coast-to-coast ego battles. No, this was about control, about silence, about empire. We're talking about an assassination that happened under the bright lights of LA in front of a packed Peterson Automotive Museum with cameras rolling and fans waiting outside. This wasn't just reckless, it was orchestrated. And now, with this new confession, we're being dragged back into the shadows of an industry that's been profiting off the silence ever since. Who paid for Biggie's life? Who gave the green light? The hitman says the money came through intermediaries connected to Suge. But then he paused. And that's when things got weird, because right there, in the middle of this bombshell, he dropped the name everyone was already thinking, but no one dared to say in court. Diddy. Not as the one who ordered the hit, not directly anyway, but as someone whose world is now rapidly caving in under the weight of old secrets and new trials. The courtroom murmur turned into a roar. Outside, Biggie fans gathered in real time, some in tears, others seething, and somewhere between the courthouse and downtown, a wave of fresh doubt rolled through the streets. If Biggie's assassin was bought, then how deep did the money trail go?
Right now, Davis is fighting for bail ahead of his trial, which he has pleaded not.
We've known about Detective Greg Kading's claims for years. His investigation into Biggie's hit exposed a chilling trail that led to a man named Wardell Poochie Foose, a known blood affiliate, a man Suge Knight allegedly trusted to get the job done. But here's where it gets twisty. Suge didn't reach out himself. Instead, it was his girlfriend at the time, acting as the broker. She arranged the hit, moved the money, sealed the deal. And in return, she was handed an immunity agreement so pristine it felt pre-written. Fans called it a betrayal. Prosecutors called it strategic. Biggie's mother called it what it was, injustice. The courtroom confession reignited that old flame. People are angry, furious, really, not just at the names being thrown around, but at how long this circus has been allowed to spin. Suge is already serving time, buried in legal battles that seem endless. Diddy, meanwhile, is facing a storm of his own. As federal prosecutors scramble to locate a missing witness in his racketeering and exploitation trial, a quiet but lethal tension is building. Was Biggie's demise just one act in a larger, far uglier play? Because if you dig into the financials, and we did, things start to smell strange. There's the estate, now worth well over $160 million, recently sold off in chunks to Primary Wave Music. 50% of his rights? Gone. The timing? Just weeks after the demise of Valletta Wallace, Biggie's mother and longtime guardian of his legacy. She was involved in the talks, reportedly right up until her passing, but now insiders are saying the sale might have been rushed, pushed forward by estate handlers aligned with industry powerhouses, including names that have appeared in multiple civil suits and whispered settlements.
Yes. He hated every bit of it. I remember one time, he was like, who did you grow up listening to? I'm like, Tupac. I ain't mentioned Biggie. That nigga ain't even talk to me for like 4 days after that. Everything with Pac, like, you couldn't say Pac was anything better than Biggie.
And then there's the money. Court documents and insider sources point to a suspicious bank transfer made within days of Biggie's assassination. We're talking about a large sum, 6 figures at least, moving from an account linked to someone in Suge Knight's orbit to a party that hasn't been publicly identified yet. Prosecutors believe this transfer could be the smoking gun. If it proves what many suspect, that someone in Suge's camp paid for Biggie's head, then we're not just revisiting an old case. We're opening a new one. And just like that, the old East Coast vs. West Coast narrative starts to crumble. It wasn't just a feud. It wasn't about pride or lyrics. It may have been a calculated operation, designed to silence a rising king and reshape the balance of power in the music industry. Remember, at the time of his demise, Biggie didn't even own the majority of his own publishing rights. Diddy's bad boy empire held most of it, until the lled Wallace renegotiated and bought it back. Now, that catalog is being chopped, sold, sliced into brandable, monetizable pieces. We have to ask, was Biggie more valuable gone than alive?
Listening to Biggie too, and I just felt Pot differently, you dig? I wasn't shooting down Biggie, you dig? Nick loved Biggie, you heard me? Believe that. But Pot made me feel a different way. Pot made me feel him. Biggie made me listen to him, bop to him, with his cadence. But Pot made me feel away.
And just when it seems like we've hit rock bottom, here comes another blast from the vault. That same immunity deal given to Suge's girlfriend? It was reportedly contingent on her never contradicting the original narrative. And yet, in private conversations now surfacing through leaks and court filings, she's been heard hinting that there were others involved, and that the real order came from higher. One source claims she referenced coastal interests and catalog leverage, industry speak for profit over people. Meanwhile, as the courtroom heats up, Diddy's legal walls are crumbling, his trial looms large, and prosecutors are scrambling to confirm whether their star witness, a woman with direct claims of long-term abuse, will even show. They've lost track of her. Her lawyer has gone quiet. Rumors are swirling she may have been pressured, intimidated, or paid. Whatever the truth, one thing is clear. This isn't just about one crime. It's about decades of unchecked power operating in the shadows of fame.
That's just my opinion. That's just a perception of me. I could be wrong, but when you listen to Tupac, bro, he touch you differently. Biggie make you feel him. Pop make you. He damn near put a battery in your back and make you go.
And that's where the conspiracy theories take a hard left into dangerous territory. Because if Biggie was taken out as collateral, who was really the intended target? Some say it was meant to send a message to Diddy, a warning from West Coast forces to stay in his lane. Others insist it was part of a calculated revenge cycle, payback for Shakur's unsolved case just months earlier. And in both stories, the same names keep popping up: Suge, Diddy, Keef D. And now, thanks to a 143-page transcript from a covert police interview, a whole new light is being cast. In that interview, Keef D, the same man now awaiting trial for Shakur's demise, claimed that Diddy once said in a room full of people that he'd give anything for Suge's head. He didn't mention Shakur specifically at first, but when pushed, he said, yeah, that dude too. It wasn't a command, but it was a signal. And for the street soldiers in that room, a signal was all it took. Keef says the price was million. For the cash, he says it was routed through intermediaries. And one of them, a man named Zip, who's conveniently no longer alive to answer questions.
And that was to destroy East Coast rap. And what I mean by that, and I know people gonna be like, yo, Gene is out of his mind and everything like that. Check this out, brother.
So now, with Biggie's alleged assassin finally confessing, Shakur's accused assassin facing trial, and Diddy tangled in the legal fight of his life, we're staring down the barrel of a truth nobody in the industry once aired out. And just as the smoke begins to clear, that suspicious bank transfer surfaces again, the one made days after Biggie's demise. It raises a haunting question. Was this about revenge, business, or something even darker? And as the details spiral deeper, so does the reach of this alleged conspiracy, because according to a leaked LAPD memo buried in a confidential file for over 2 decades, Biggie wasn't supposed to be the last. That document, quietly handed to federal investigators in the early 2000s, described a supposed coordinated campaign targeting prominent East Coast voices. Nas, Busta Rhymes, even DJ Clue were listed as high-profile disruptors. Not enemies of a label, but obstacles in a territorial shift where West Coast dominance wasn't just desired, it was enforced. The memo warned of pending retaliatory actions disguised as street violence. And then, just like that, it vanished from the record.
And they was getting a lot of money to make albums and records. When they had guys down south that these labels was paying $250,000, $300,000 on record deals, and these guys was bringing back platinum albums and everything like that. So what they had to do was, they had to keep New York rapping.
So what was this, really? A music war gone off the rails? Or was this a carefully calculated purge of anyone standing in the way of what Death Row Records had become? A machine fueled by fear, loyalty, and silence. The more we follow the money and motives, the more it feels like Biggie's fate was never about lyrical beefs or G-Funk rivalries. It was about empire consolidation. He wasn't taken down because of what he rapped. He was taken down because of what he represented. and what his continued rise could have cost the ones watching from across the chessboard. And no one knew the weight of that loss more than Voletta Wallace. Biggie's mother was never just a grieving parent. She was a force. After her son was gunned down in Los Angeles, she did what most wouldn't dare. She went straight at the system. She sued the LAPD for wrongful demise, accusing specific officers of collusion with death row affiliates. She called out corruption, named names, filed motion, and yet her every step was met with roadblocks. The FBI admitted in 2003 that key files had gone missing from their Shakur Smalls task force archives, a suspicious mishandling that conveniently erased potential links between rogue officers and the very crew that Biggie's confessed assassin now points to.
But believe it or not, my son was my best friend. I miss him a lot.
Her lawsuit dragged on for years. The LAPD refused to settle. Judges recused themselves. Evidence was dismissed. It drained her emotionally, financially, spiritually. But she never backed down. In her own words, "I will never stop fighting. My son's legacy is not for sale." And yet 2 decades later, the justice she fought for still hangs in limbo. The men she challenged, promoted, retired, protected. The silence around them, paid for one sealed court record at a time. We aren't just talking about a music tragedy anymore. We're talking about institutional betrayal, one that buried truth under badges and paper trails. Which brings us back to the man many still view as Biggie's closest ally, Sean Puff Daddy Combs. Publicly, he played the part of the shattered friend, the mourning mogul, the one who walked behind Biggie's casket in that iconic Brooklyn procession, head bowed, sunglasses on. But behind the scenes, accounts from former bodyguards and industry insiders tell a very different story. Gene Deal, one of Puff's ex-security staff, has long maintained that warning signs were ignored, that Puff was explicitly told not to travel to LA at that time, that tensions were too high, and Biggie's presence, fresh off Shakur's own tragedy, would be dangerous.
Like I told people, I said if Miss Wallace would have called me and told me to shut it down, I would have shut it down. Miss Wallace ain't called, she knew how to get in touch with me. If Miss Wallace didn't tell me to shut it down, I'ma keep doing it because I respect you, Miss Wallace.
According to Deal, Puff was briefed on multiple threats, including intelligence that rival factions were looking for an opportunity to retaliate. Still, the trip went ahead. Still, the entourage arrived in LA. And then, after the hit, Gene claims that Puff began distancing himself from the inner circle, especially from those who had witnessed chaos up close. There were no follow-up security debriefs, no joint statements, just silence. And that silence, according to those closest to the scene, was deafening. Of course, there's no direct proof that Puff had any knowledge of the setup, but the timeline raises questions that have haunted fans for years. Why weren't hotel security measures increased? Why was Biggie's location made public at a party with known rivals in attendance? Why was the car so exposed? Why, if Deal's testimony is to be believed, did Puff begin making calls that night, not to the police, but to lawyers?
What was the backstory behind that, Big Mom calling you?
My man, that had to be, if I say exhilarating, it has to be one of the highlights of coming out here.
We may never know the full truth, but the confession we heard in court last week shifts the gravity. Suddenly, the old excuse that this was just random gang violence no longer holds. This was coordinated, funded, executed, which leads us to the most uncomfortable question of all. Was Puff just another victim of the chaos, or did he know more than he's ever let on? In the final weeks of his life, Christopher Wallace wasn't just watching his back. He was carrying the weight of something darker. In a now infamous radio interview on March 5, 1997, just 4 days before the hit, Biggie laughed nervously as he joked about his own funeral. He referenced the paranoia swirling around him, saying things like, "They're coming for me," in a way that straddled humor and horror. For years, fans thought he was playing into his gangster persona, but now, with the benefit of hindsight and the confession from his alleged assassin, those comments hit different. He wasn't posturing, he was forecasting. Sources close to Biggie said his mood had shifted sharply during that LA trip. His usually sharp sense of humor dulled into quiet introspection. He began requesting extra hotel security, asking questions about side exits, and even changed hotels abruptly after receiving a late-night phone call from an unlisted number, one that, according to one source, ended with, "You shouldn't be here." There's no record of what was said before or after that line, but the very next morning, Biggie's entourage was moved to the Peterson party's location under tight direction. It was clear he felt watched, and maybe by then he knew he was being tracked more closely than even his team realized.
Miss Wallace is a strong lady. You know what I'm saying? Miss Wallace, you know, she, and I'm not saying because she's Jamaican or anything like that. That she got that down home, like she is about her business.
What makes it worse is that Biggie was in a creative zone like no other. Life After was set to drop, an album layered with irony and prophecy, full of themes about mortality, legacy, and fate. Tracks like You're Nobody felt like eerie declarations rather than clever metaphors. He wasn't just rapping about demise, he was surrounded by it. From Shakur's recent demise to the constant stream of threats in his periphery, Biggie's last days were soaked in the tension of inevitability. And yet, he showed up, performed, smiled in interviews, but behind the lenses and microphones, he was a man already halfway to ghosthood. This wasn't paranoia, this was premonition, a sharp mind picking up signals from a machine that wanted him silenced. And the most haunting part, he knew it, he said it, he lived it. Biggie wasn't blindsided in that LA intersection. He was bracing for it, carrying it in his chest every night he didn't sleep. Every time the phone rang without a name, every second he stood in the spotlight knowing what shadows were waiting just beyond. His demise wasn't just a loss, it was the fulfillment of a warning, one he tried to broadcast, and one nobody heard until it was too late.
I used to be hurt because I knew the people that she had around her was Puff Boys. So we could never connect like that. So only time I tried to connect with Miss Wallace is when she needed me and she used Perry Sanders to call me.
Because what's now emerging isn't just one man's truth, it's a trigger pulling open an entire underworld that's been sitting behind studio walls and platinum plaques for years. Industry whispers say 2 more names are expected to surface soon, accomplices that played critical roles in the coordination and cash movement behind Biggie's final moments. One of them, we're told, is still operating inside the business. The other disappeared in 2003 after a quiet settlement in a separate lawsuit involving Death Row associates. Their identities have never been revealed. But now, with this new momentum, that could change. Fast. The case is being reopened. Subpoenas are flying, prosecutors who once shelved the files are circling back, and with the hitman's confession now triggering new forensic reviews of financial records, travel logs, and phone taps, it's only a matter of time before the rest of the puzzle starts snapping into place. Because if this was truly about money and power, the question isn't just who pulled the trigger, it's who collected the payout. So we have to ask, if Biggie's life was worth ending to someone, who gained the most from his silence? Who filled that vacuum? Who rose higher while the dusk was still settling? We're not pointing fingers yet, but trust we'll be watching where this trail goes next. The legacy of Christopher Wallace deserves nothing less than the full, unfiltered truth, no matter how uncomfortable it gets. And now it's your turn. Could this entire operation have been orchestrated from inside the very walls meant to protect Biggie? Was his life sacrificed for catalog rights and power moves? Drop your theories in the comments, and don't hold back, this rabbit hole is only getting deeper. Until next time, stay sharp, stay skeptical, and always read between the beats.